we may be socially and communally oriented, but when it comes down to it, our primary concern is how does a big communal issue impact me personally? We here have been waiting for the government to pass our country's budget. Well, at about 6 a.m. this morning, the budget was passed. Some are happy and some are not. But at 6:15 a.m., I was not happy because, as I've told you, at that hour, I am driving my daughter to the train station. And so the route we take passes by the Knesset, the parliament. And just as we get there, we are forced to stand still because the prime minister is leaving the Knesset because they've been there all night, and the police and those accompanying him are not letting anybody through. And so we just made it to the train. But may they put this budget to good use in their wisdom. It's funny things we remember. I was at the optometrist today. Regards from Gershon, Tzipora. And I imagine in anticipation of our class today, I recalled a time many years ago, when Teresa Swern stood in front of a Beth Tikvah audience, thanking my father, Zichrono Livracha, for a lecture he had just given. And he had begun by sharing that he, earlier in the day, had been at an ophthalmologist, and his eyes were still a bit blurry, and people should indulge him. In her thank you, Teresa was very sharp, and she said, well, I don't know how you're seeing, but certainly I can attest to the fact that your insight was not at all impacted. I thought that was very clever. Tomorrow night, we reenact creating the covenant at Sinai, Matan Torah. And if you read chapter 19 in the book of Shmot, Exodus, it's a very powerful scene. First of all, what we should all be doing today, yesterday, and tomorrow is laundry. For in fact, those are the instructions that Moshe is meant to give to Bnei Israel, to clean themselves, make sure they are pure, and then you hear the thunder and the lightning, and it's very powerful. And that is meant to be what we feel tomorrow night and the next day. And I'd like to suggest that too many of us don't necessarily feel that, and that's unfortunate. When Esther Petrov last week asked how we can be a role model to ourselves and perhaps the rest of the world, it occurred to me that's one of the ways, by taking Shavuot as being one of the most essential holidays. Because what we're saying is, year after year, we recommit to establishing this covenant at Sinai. And not every nation does that. We have been studying over the last few weeks, as is tradition, Pirkei Avot, chapters of our fathers. Annually, I think of my father's profound awe of our sages. He observed, in face of Khurban, destruction and exile, that Jeremiah and other prophets discussed, the people of Israel had two options: feel rejected by God and give up on the covenant that we established at Sinai, or, as our stubborn sages insisted upon doing, as we see in the Talmud, and particularly in Pirkei Avot, which is a book all about creating moral character, they said, let's accept our weaknesses. Forget about the weaknesses of everybody else, but let's accept our weaknesses, and year after year, commit to saying we have to work on our character. We are not perfect, but we have the ability, whoever we are, rabbis included, to better ourselves, fix ourselves, and then reach out to the world, but as Jews. And we'll get into that today. Go into the world, but as Jews. Okay, going to share the screen. Chaim Nachman Bialik, who grew up in an observant home, as he entered his teenage years and a little older, became attracted to the outside world, but still appreciated the religious world. And one of his most famous poems is Hamatmid, which means the diligent one or the consistent one. And in this case, it's talking about a student of Talmud. And he describes and even praises the disciplined devotion of a particular matmid, Talmudic student, and even admires his single-mindedness in the beginning of the lengthy poem. We won't read it in its entirety. The poet accompanies the student as he heads to the study hall while the rest of the world still sleeps. And that testifies to his determination. And he describes the temptations the student encounters along the way. And I want you to look to what those temptations are. And the poem begins. And picture this student walking from home to the yeshiva. And left and right of him, the flowers and grasses speak to him from their dreams. We too are sleeping. Even the stars above him take on voices and wink. We sleep although our eyes are open. The drunken odors of 1,000 flowers mount to his nostrils, intoxicating him. A wave of breeze breaks upon his lips, broadening of bosom and throat. The lad then opens his mouth to breathe in. He bares his breast to receive the wind, and like a man weary from his heaving stones, his innards begging, pleading for rest, he lifts his strengthless hands as if in prayer. O dear wind, take me, carry me from here, and find a place for me where I may rest. For here is only weariness and pain, but his raised hands bruise against the garden fence and remind him he has wandered from the path. Swift, he recalls his vows, recalls his corner, and turns him from the tempter's voice and flees. What are the temptations that the student encounters on his way to the study hall? Anyone?
The beauty of the field, the beauty of the flower,
Yes.
the scents, the beauty, the odors that were intoxicating.
Certainly not negative commandments, not something that we would look down upon.
It was beautiful.
But he persists. He doesn't let them keep him from hurrying on.
Sort of like the world, the whole world, everything in it, all its beauty, he has to put that aside and study. And it's very, very tempting to join the world and leave the study behind.
Okay, we will continue with that. Okay, thank you, Michael. Rhoda? You have to unmute yourself, Rhoda. You can do it.
Yeah, and I did it. Okay.
You did it.
Maybe what we're saying here is that we need to smell the roses as well and do it well.
Okay, well, in a few moments, Bialik is going to be saying that. And you have a sense when the student is almost saying that he's tired, and you have a sense that he's struggling. He's struggling, but he's not going to stop. And Bialik likes that. He admires the fact that he's not going to stop at this point. Okay, anyone else? Now let's go on and see how Bialik continues. As if the moments could not move too swiftly that lie between him and his trusted friend, he hastens to his place and takes his stand, and like a pillar stays from morn till night, a complete day. Still standing, he will eat his midday crust. Still standing, he will half outwatch the night. Granite is yielding clay. Compared with him, a Jewish boy unto the Torah vowed. Now, do you have a sense yet of Bialik being critical here? Anything indicating that to you?
I think, the way he says he's standing with a midday crust, like he's not even getting enough food for himself. He's not really taking care of himself.
Okay. Good.
He's inflexible. He's got a mission. He doesn't see anything around him. The rest
Okay.
of society doesn't exist.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you at this point, could you picture another type of student in this position? Not a Talmud student, but somebody studying something else, doing the exact same thing? Gloria's nodding yes. Did you do that when you were studying to be a nurse? No, you didn't? Okay.
I'm
You're
thinking a scientist would be like that.
Scientists would be like that.
The medical science, young doctor seems to be focused on their direction and the world falls aside.
Okay. Now, why am I asking that? I think I have a niece who's studying law that's almost like that. How do you feel about what you see so far? I'm doing this intentionally, and I'll tell you, to be quite honest, why. I think for the most part, we, in various contexts, have drawn pictures in our classes that have allowed us to express negativity toward those in a yeshiva, but only when we suggest that they don't do their share in other parts of life. And it's important for me to make that clear today for the purposes of our class today. And that holds, even though it should be known that more are entering the workplace and are serving in units of Tzahal. Because today I am looking to express admiration for those who are keeping Torah and Talmudic study alive. Now, the question will be how to keep it alive, but certainly as a matmid, with determination and seriousness. Okay, I hope that is clear.
Can I say something?
You didn't raise your hand, but okay.
Go
ahead.
When I see this poem, I listen to your talk, I thank God that the sages of the past, like Akiva and his student and Gamli and their student, focused, because we would not have all this rich material to sit before.
Yes. But keep in mind, we don't just want to rely on people of the past. We want that to continue today as well.
Right, right.
Okay. All right.
We need it all the time.
Amen. Okay. Now let's go on. Okay. Now, he goes on, Bialik. In the yeshiva is a holy silence, which he, the Talmud student, is first to break, for there in the dark corner wait for him his faithful companions since the day he first arrived. There are his friends, his stand, you know what, his candle and his Talmud. And he goes on to say, can it be that while life around you with 1,000 voices calls in a thunder chorus, can it be that not a murmur to your heart has passed, that in self-conquest you remain blind and deaf? So here, in this last part, Bialik is definitely calling out the student and saying, yes, I admire that you are a matmid, a masmid, but you've got to do something with this. Keep on studying, strengthen that studying, but you've got to bring it to the outside. You've got to look at the grass, whatever that represents. You have to. And you see the criticism when he calls it the dark corner and blind and deaf. Now, by telling him that I want you to not remain in that dark corner does not suggest that he's telling him to study any less. Now, there is Rav Dov Neda, when he was a student, wrote the following about this. Bialik yearns for the day when the Torah scholar will glance outside the Beit Midrash's windows and finally realize that the world eagerly waits to hear his or her scholarly voice. The poem Hamatmid truly frames the existential conundrum that should bother every denizen of the Beit Midrash. To which type of Beit Midrash do we belong? Do we dwell in a Beit Midrash of windows, or do we dwell in a Beit Midrash of dark corners? In the final stanza of his poem, Bialik expresses his final pleas and dream to the Matmid. He dreams that just once the wind of life should pass through you, the Matmid, and blow clear through the yeshiva doors. He dreams of a day when the voice of Torah and the voice of the world will no longer be separated by the doors of the Beit Midrash. Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, somebody? Okay. Bialik here is touching on a theme, issue that Chazal, Chachamenu Zichronam Livracha, our sages deal with. And let's look at one of our Mishnayot from Pirkei Avot. Rabbi Yaakov would say, one who walks along a road and is studying and interrupts his studying to say, how beautiful is this tree? How beautiful is this plowed field? The Torah considers it as if he deserves capital punishment. What's your reaction to this? Anyone?
It's totally opposite to what Bialik would say. You know,
Okay.
because you know, we want to open it up to everyone. We want, you know, Torah to be open to everyone, and we want the scholar to see the rest of the world and be able to share what he has learned.
I'm not, what you just said now, I'm not sure I'm understanding how
Well, the
you're
thing is,
reading
I'm
this.
bringing together what Bialik has said before, that, you know, just to be in your world and not have the windows open restricts what you can share. And
Yes.
once you can see the windows, then you can share your scholarship. And
Okay, yeah. Okay, so that is one point, definitely. What else doesn't seem to fit in with our tradition? We have brachot, blessings, for seeing a beautiful tree. When you're walking and you happen to see something in nature, you see a beautiful ocean, a magnificent mountain, there are specific blessings. So this seems a bit extreme. Somebody's studying, but he stops and he compliments God's creation, and look what the punishment is. He deserves capital punishment? Can anybody suggest why that would be?
I think it might have to do with the intention. So in other words, if he's studying and he stops to look at the beautiful tree because it's a distraction for him, that may be worthy of capital punishment. But if he stops and looks and says, look how beautiful God made that tree, that's worthy of being in honor. Like it's true. The motivation of why you're doing what you're doing is so important here.
Okay, nice, Michael. Anybody else? Okay, another suggestion is that there are those who felt that most important is our acknowledging God's power, not by looking at nature and creation, but through Torah, through his revelation. Now, like everything that we discuss, there is constantly a dynamic. We want to see God in everything and not just through the books. There is another explanation, very interesting, entirely different, given by Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, who was the son of the first chief rabbi of Palestine, Rav Avraham Yitzchak Kook, who we've studied here. And he suggests the following. Why was he, the walker, deserving of capital punishment? The walker's negative activity is his belief that appreciating the trees and fields' beauty constitutes an interruption in his Torah study. So this is actually similar to what Michael said. Instead, the walker ought to unify his appreciation of the divine source of the beauty of creation with his understanding of God and his Torah. In other words, the two go together. To even think that it's an interruption doesn't make sense. Which is really, as Beth said, similar to Bialik saying, studying and appreciating the wind and the grass, it all goes together. Now, Rhoda?
It would seem to me that this individual walking alone has taken on a responsibility of learning Torah under difficult circumstances or unusual circumstances for whatever reason, and is not in a study hall. So
Go ahead.
I just find this so harsh that taking on this responsibility should be enough. And if your concentration leaves you for a few minutes and you appreciate something, I think it's terrific. I mean, you're not daydreaming. Otherwise, there's something positive coming out of this lack of concentration.
Yeah. Very demanding, but I don't know. Do you think teachers are demanding enough these days? And do we not benefit more from the demanding teacher?
Yes, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but this just proves that we're not perfect. That, you know, I find it too harsh. I can't live with this.
No.
I would venture to say that probably nobody received this punishment. So why bother saying it? To drive the point home, I guess. I would say the point, as we're going to see in a few minutes, is that there's this constant struggle between a trade-off of values that we constantly face in life. Because the value of study and the value of leisure, relaxation, noticing nature, and we're meant to do both in life.
Balance.
We really are. We really are. We really are. And that leads us to an example of this tension that's presented to us in story form, story cycle of 7 rabbinic biographic tales in the Talmud in Ketubot 62b. And I had studied this with a Talmudist named Karen Miller Jackson, who lives in Renana. And these are 7 tales, Agadot, and they are really, you'll see, warnings to 7 rabbis about their responsibility as students of Torah or Talmud and their responsibilities as husbands and fathers. And there's a tension there. And they're going to see that if they don't appreciate what their responsibilities are, people are going to suffer. Sometimes it's going to be them. Sometimes it's going to be their wives. And sometimes it might be their child. Now, what's very interesting is, and I've said this before, that the Talmud shares these stories with us. It does not paint any of our rabbinic scholars as people who are perfect. There is much to learn from the wrongdoings, and everyone is human. So that we have said, there's no doubt, and I haven't brought any of the Mishnayot from Pirkei Avot because we understand it. You know, that studying Torah, we know, is one of the important pillars. That's clear. And the Mishnah that talks about which is more important, study or action. Well, study because it leads to action. That's an ongoing debate, but both are equally important. But if you don't study, you won't have the action. Right. So I find these examples fascinating, but it makes it clear that life is not simple, but certainly as much as you are meant to study, it makes it very clear in these stories that it is not just about studying. That's not life. Okay. So, the first story. Rav Rechumi. Now you're going to find some of these wild. That's okay. And you might even find them offensive. That's also okay. Because they're interesting and they make a point. Rav Rechumi, who was commonly at the school of Rava at Machoza, used to return home on Erev Yom Kippur. Now, one more thing I have to say. So we know that very often the rabbis would go away with permission from their wives and study for long periods of time.
Okay.
Some would go, initially it said they could go for 30 days. And some would say for 3 years. And we know the most famous would go for 12 years. Okay. Now, this wasn't an easy matter. Husband had conjugal rights, responsibilities. Okay. Rav Rechumi, who was commonly at the school of Rav at Machoza, used to return home on Erev Yom Kippur. Once a year, he would come home. And when did he come home? On Erev Yom Kippur, which is strange, because on Erev Yom Kippur, you're supposed to abstain from sexual relations. So go figure. One day, he was pulled in by his learning, so engrossed. His wife was looking out for him, saying, oh, he's coming now, he's coming now. But he did not come. she became depressed. A tear fell from her eye. He was at that moment sitting on a roof. The roof collapsed under him and he was killed. Now, what do you think the message is in this story?
I love this story because it's telling people, these rabbis who are studying, and it's their whole life. They're saying, open your eyes. This is not your whole life. You have another life. You have a wife, and you can't just leave her alone. It's a
Yeah,
beautiful way. How else would these rabbis hear unless they would read it in the Talmud? No, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's so ingenious. It's beautiful.
It is also saying Torah is important, but the human life is.
Yeah, there's more to life.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? The
human
wife,
individual.
look, and you picture the wife
Mhm.
one time a year, and she's not even going to be physically close with him, and she cries, and then he's so engrossed he doesn't even come, but he gets his.
Yeah.
And it's not just that he gets his, and then she's going to be left alone.
Permanently.
Okay. All right. So that's a warning. And that's what these stories are going to be. It's like a kovets, a collection of 7 stories that are warnings to the rabbis. Second story. Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chia, was the son-in-law of Rabbi Yanai. Yehuda went and sat in the Beit Midrash, and every Friday night, he would come home to his wife. And when he would come home, one would see a pillar of fire in front of him. That represents passion. One day, he was pulled in by his learning, and since they did not see the pillar of fire preceding him, Rabbi Yanai, his father-in-law, said, turn over his bed. For if Yehuda was still alive, he would never forgo his biblical duties of marital relations, and so he died. Now, this was very sad. His father-in-law assumed, knowing his son-in-law, that if he didn't see the pillar of fire, the son-in-law must have died. And so, in fact, what happened was that he did die. Now, this seems very, very strange. But again, it's a warning. He would go home every weekend, every Friday. But in this case, he gets engrossed as well. And whereas he should have had the passion, even if he went home once a week, doesn't matter. His wife was waiting for him and he should have gone.
The other thing is his wife is waiting for him, but he's coming home all fired up only on Torah.
Literally.
So
Yes.
he can't, see the wife because he's all fired up on what he was studying.
Exactly. And so he dies. Okay.
I think these stories are saying to us that neglect of the individual is not a good thing.
You're going to say that at least 4 more times. Okay. All right. Now, this very sad, this next one. They all are, actually. Rabbi Hanina ben Chaikinai set out for the home of his rabbi at the end of the wedding of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Hanina, Wait for me and I'll come with you. He, Rabbi Hanina, did not wait. He went and he sat learning at the home of his rabbi for 12 years.
Goodness.
By the time he left, all the roads of the city had changed, and he did not know how to get home. He went and sat by the river. He heard young girls calling out, Bat Chakinai, Bat Chakinai, which means the daughter of him. Fill up your jug and let's go. He said, this must be our child. He followed her. His wife was sitting and sifting flour. She lifted up her eyes, saw him. It's been 12 years. Her heart leaped up and her soul fled from her. In other words, she died. Bar Chakinai said, Master of the universe, is this a proper reward for the humble? He asked for mercy upon his wife, and she lived. So what happened in this story? He doesn't even know that he has a daughter. He was away for 12 years. But because he hears these people saying, daughter of Chakinai, he realizes that this must be my daughter. And when he goes, the wife is so startled, she has a heart attack, dies, but he prays to God and she comes alive again. So who's been affected?
The
Who's
wife.
been affected in this story?
The entire family. It's
The
tragic.
entire family. He realizes what he's missed out on. The wife dies, she comes back to life, but who knows what condition. And the daughter, what are you
What?
coming back now for? I lived 12 years without you.
But this is a modern problem also because, the people go after making money and forget the family circle.
Claudette, all of these stories happen
Are
today,
modern. Right.
Mhm.
or otherwise it would not be worth reading them.
Yeah.
True.
So choose the one. Okay. All right. Number 4, Rabbi Chama Bar Bissa went away from home and spent 12 years at the house of study. When he returned, he said, I will not act as did Ben Chachinai, the one previously. He therefore entered the local house of study and sent word to his house, which is very interesting. He didn't want to shock his wife. But there's a question here. If there was a local house of study, why did he have to go away for 12 years? Okay. Meanwhile, his son, Rabbi Oshaya, entered and sat down before him. Now, he doesn't know it's his son. Rabbi Oshaya addressed to him a question concerning the law. He saw how well versed he was in his studies. He became very depressed. He said to himself, had I been here, I also could have had such a child. He entered his house. His son came after him. He doesn't know it's his. Rav Chama rose before him, thinking that he wished to ask him some further legal questions. His wife said to him, what kind of man stands up before his son? So here again, we have a case. The father doesn't realize that it's his son, and he feels, oh my God, look what I've missed out on. I could have been preparing this son. And he could have been somebody that I would have been close to. He doesn't even mention that he's missed out on being with his wife.
Doesn't matter.
Well, okay. Now, 5th story. So you don't have death in all of the stories, but you have tragic events in all of them.
Mhm.
It is related further that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi arranged for his son to marry a daughter of the household of Rabbi Chia. When he came to write the marriage contract, the girl died. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, "Is there, heaven forbid, some disqualification in these families, as it appears that God prevented this match from taking place?" All right, this isn't really important. He went and arranged for his son to marry a daughter of the household of Rabbi Yosef ben Zimra. They agreed for him that they would support him for 12 years to go study in the study hall. It was assumed that he would first go to study and afterward get married. They passed the girl in front of the groom, and when he saw her, he said, "Oh, please, let it be just 6 years." They passed her in front of him again, and he said to them, "I will marry her now and then go to study." He was then ashamed to see his father, as he thought he would reprimand him, because when he saw the girl, he desired her and could not wait. His father placated him and said to him, "My son, you have your maker's perception," meaning you acted the same way that God does. What he means is, remember, God was originally going to have the people make the Beit HaMikdash when they got into Israel, but instead they make the Mishkan in the desert. So he's saying to him, you have the same passion that God had. Well, what happens? After his wedding, he went and he sat for 12 years in the study hall. By the time he came back, his wife had become infertile as a consequence of spending many years without her husband. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, "What should we do? If he will divorce her, people will say this poor woman waited and hoped for naught. If he will marry another woman to beget children, people will say this one who bears him children is his wife, and that one who lives with him is his mistress." Therefore, her husband pleaded with God to have mercy on her, and she was cured. So it has a good ending, but in the meantime, look how this woman had to suffer.
May I ask where these stories are coming from? Is this in the Gemara or?
Yes, yes.
It's in the Gemara. It's in the
Yes.
Gemara.
Tuvot.
And people read these stories, and yet they create the same mistakes. They have the
That's
same.
surprising. You've never seen that people make the same mistakes that other people have made? Good morning.
It's true.
Now, the next story, which we usually think of very positively, is the story of Rabbi Akiva. Right? We think of him as, wow.
However,
Rabbi Akiva was the shepherd of Ben Kalba Savua, one of the wealthy residents of Yerushalayim. The daughter of Ben Kalba Savua saw that he was humble and refined. She said to him, "If I betroth myself to you, will you go to the study hall to learn Torah?" He said to her, "Yes." She became betrothed to him privately and sent him off to study. Her father heard this and became angry. He removed her from his house and took a vow prohibiting her from benefiting from his property. Rabbi Akiva went and sat for 12 years in the study hall. When he came back to his house, he brought 12,000 students with him. And as he approached, he heard an old man saying to his wife, "For how long will you lead the life of a widow of a living man, living alone, while your husband is in another place?" She said to him, if he would listen to me, he would sit and study for another 12 years. When Rabbi Akiva heard this, he said, "I have permission to do this." He went back, sat for another 12 years in the study hall. When he came back, he brought 24,000 students with him. His wife heard and went out toward to greet him. Her neighbors said, "Borrow some clothes and wear them, as your current apparel is not appropriate to meet an important person." She said to them, "A righteous man understands the life of his beast." When she came to him, she fell on her face and kissed his feet. His attendants pushed her away as they did not know who she was. And he said to them, "Leave her alone, as my Torah knowledge and yours is actually hers. In the meantime, her father heard that a great man came to town. He said, I will go to him. Maybe he will nullify my vow and I will be able to support my daughter. He came to him to ask about nullifying his vow, and Rabbi Akiva said to him, did you vow thinking about this, that this Akiva would become a great man? He said to him, if I had believed he would know even one chapter or even one halacha, I would not have been so harsh. He said to him, I am he. Ben Kalba Savua fell on his face and kissed his feet and gave him half of his money. The Gemara relates, Rabbi Akiva's daughter did the same thing for Ben Azai, who was also a simple person, and she caused him to learn Torah in a similar way by betrothing herself to him and sending him off to study. This explains the folk saying that people say who follows the daughter's actions are the same as her mother's. What do you think of that? What does that say about Rachel? That she did the same for her daughter, encouraged that. Would that fly today?
No, wouldn't fly today. But,
And
it's fascinating that, in spite of it all, she accepted it.
Yeah. She did. And he gives her credit. Now, it might sound like a very small thing.
No,
And our
but it's so
final
important.
story,
It's
our
so
final
important that he gave her credit in front of the students
yeah,
so that
yeah,
they would appreciate her.
yeah, no small thing. And our final story, and it's significant that it is also on Erev Yom Kippur, when we're supposed to have a cheshbon hanefesh, take an accounting of ourselves. If we remember that the Talmud is, again, warning the rabbis to take a good look at themselves. Rav Yosef, son of Rava, was sent by his father to the academy under Rav Yosef, and they arranged for him to stay there 6 years. Having been there 3 years, it was Erev Yom Kippur, and he said, I will go and see my family. When his father heard, he took a weapon and went out to meet him. You have remembered your prostitute? Or alternatively, you have remembered your dove? They got involved in a quarrel and neither one ate the meal before the fast. What is the father saying? He's saying to the son, how dare you leave your Torah learning to go to your wife? Your obligation is to your Torah study. The son came to his senses and realized he should be going home. But look what this all led to. Both rabbis, and what happens? They get so involved in this quarrel that neither of them really prepare for Yom Kippur. They don't have the Su'udah Mafseket, the meal before the fast. That's quite a story that the Talmud is leaving this series of 7 with. So the same volume that is impressing us with the significance of Torah study, if we at all have a hope for bringing something better to this world, is also telling us, keep your eyes open to everything around us. And you can't just sit in the dark corner. You have a family, you're meant to be with that family. Yeah. Anyone else? A thought or two?
Yes, I found the music. It's Mel.
That's what you were thinking about this whole time? Good. So what
Well,
is it?
I found Ein Keloheinu,
That's what-
Ein
That's what his
Kadoheinu.
other daughter said an hour ago.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay, so that's it.
okay, good. Rhoda, anything else to say?
Yeah, I looked up in my Pirkei Avot, and the translation that I have is very different than the one you sent out, that you had on the screen.
So what is it?
Um,
Is the rabbi's name different?
Rabbi Hanina ben Chakinai says, one who stays awake at night or who travels alone on the road but turns his heart to idleness, indeed, he bears guilt for his soul.
Yeah,
Very different.
translations can be very, very different. Sometimes the number can also be different
It
depending
was,
on the
it was,
edition.
it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Okay. All right. This was your good month, Rhoda, because I know you love Pirkei Avot.
Yep.
Just for
Thank
you.
you. Thanks.
Okay. Marlene, you're hanging in? You gonna go home tomorrow? Good. Okay. You're on mute. A refuah shlema. I said strange locations. We have Marlene with us from a hospital room, but she's doing well. Okay. All right, somebody's talking. All right.
Bracha, I think there's one major omission in all of these stories except for Rabbi Akiva's. And that is that man has an obligation to relate to God and man, but he also has an obligation to relate man to man. And in most of these stories, the rabbis who are the subject of the story has forgotten that responsibility to relate to other men or people in their lives, except for Rabbi Akiva, who actually at the end of the story does show that his wife has a share of what he has done.
Did you mean to say they don't relate to other women, or?
No, people.
That's
They've
interesting.
placed the relationship with God through study over and above the relationships that they have with other people.
People. Except for maybe when they're studying Chavruta, but just as study partners.
But even that is limited.
Uh-huh. Interesting, something to be explored. Okay, nothing keeps you down, Marlene, good. Okay.
I'm trying.
Well, good for you. Claudette.
Yeah. I think quite a few prophets talked about this. That, God doesn't only want all the sacrifices. He wants us to be aware and take care of the people.
Oh, for sure. No, he got annoyed with them. He said, you
Yes.
can give me sacrifices, but I don't want them if you don't know how to take care of the orphan, the widow, and the poor.
Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. Rhoda, is your hand up? No. Okay. You're just holding your head up. Okay, everybody. Have a Chag Shavuot Sameach.
And you
And
as well.
here's the thunder.
Sameach.